Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Woo! All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today we've got Julius Walkenhorst on the podcast, all the way from Germany, Frankfurt, Germany. That is. Julius, what's going on? Tell us, man. Tell us, what you're working on, what you do, what's your special magic skill? Who are you? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be on the show today. Yeah, my name is Julius. I live in Frankfurt. I'm a full-time student, but I pretty much rather focus myself on my two projects, which are being the chief of staff at Polar AI and being the founder of my own NGO called ThirdAid, and we make social donation processes transparent again. To just make this world a better place, actually.
Awesome. Got to make the world a better place. Sounds like a Michael Jackson, song, We Are the World. Yeah.
I really like the song, actually. I heard it like a couple of times when I was younger with my mom. I think like to make this world a better place is like intrinsically a big value for every human, or should be, actually.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, man. Got to make the world a better place. Yeah. I feel like a lot of that doesn't happen anymore. People don't really focus on making the world a better place. It's more about selfish endeavors, not really about making the world a better place. Well, maybe there's Elon Musk. Maybe he's trying to make the world a better place, or Mars a better place.
In some sort, definitely.
Yeah. Cybertrucks. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, man. So, Julius, so you're in Germany, but you guys are based out of San Francisco. I think we talked a little bit offline on that.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we are fully remote. I've never met one of my colleagues at Polar AI. So we've been remote from day one, actually. And I pretty much got used to working remotely all of the time. I also set up ThirdAid, my own NGO, fully remotely as well. And now we have team hubs in Singapore, here in Germany, in Austria, Croatia, and Italy. That's it. And working remotely, it's quite a good thing, because you get to work together with people from all over the world, from different cultures, and it never becomes boring.
Yeah, it doesn't come boring, man. I totally know what you mean. You get to learn and grow. At bigger companies, they typically, I've worked at startups before earlier on, and then moved into bigger companies and things like that. And it's I remember going in there and there was this big thing about collaboration. It's and being in the actual physical location. And I was like, man, I built plenty of awesome fucking shit, man. And you know what? I wasn't in physical location. We did it all remotely. I work with plenty of Russians. I've worked with plenty of Ukrainians. I've worked with, Middle East. I've worked with, Argentina, Brazil. I've worked with all types of countries, Americans, and did it remotely all over. No problem. But, it was before the pandemic, everybody in a lot of the bigger companies were no, you have to be here in physical presence. We have to collaborate in physical presence, because if not, we don't know. We're not really building anything. We're not really a team. And that's false. I built a lot of amazing shit remotely.
Yeah. And what would you say when you look at it now? Did you prefer working in larger corporations, or really smaller teams or smaller companies, actually?
There's pros and cons in both, right? When we think about things in critical ways, when we think about critical thinking in general, it is, when you're working at a smaller startup, there's pros that you have the room to grow. There's pros that, in that room with growth, you can't, there's just an infinite amount of experience you can gather, because you're wearing many hats. The cons are you are wearing too many hats. Sometimes you could be working a little bit more than the average person at a bigger org, because there might be 5 different types of people doing the same position or skill set as you to take the load off, right? You have a lot more players in the actual park or in the ball game to actually let off the weight versus when you're just a smaller startup. Everybody's like doing 4 or 3 different things, or maybe even more. Who knows? But it's just like you have to wear many hats. You work a lot more hours typically. And you don't have that much funding typically sometimes. So those things happen. You don't have all the fancy resources, right? So those are some of the cons, I would say, for those, and then also some of the pros. But yeah, but also when you're working for a bigger company, you have less ownership, right? And less loyalty in some sense, because it's like, hey, you're a dime a dozen now. We feel like we're at to scale that we don't give a shit that you work here and that you're special and that you can do this. We can get 5 other people that we believe can, do as good as you, which isn't always true, but they seem to skim on, or they seem to focus on the basic skills that you have and not focus on your superpower. And the reason that may be is because you have so many different type of liaisons or middlemen or whatever you want to call them that are kind of, I don't know, they're blocking your true power, right? They only want certain things from you, and that's all they're able to tap you out for. So they're not able to dig in deeper to find out what you really are extremely good at. They only focus on what you signed up for the position for, and just say, okay, well, if he's an engineer, I just want to hire him as an engineer, do these certain tasks. It's very task driven versus if I'm an engineer and I want you to come up with something unique when you're working at a startup, and you're going to have a unique scenario where you're actually going to be doing some product management and engineering at the same time. Right. And a little bit more of a back end architecture that may be something uniquely you might be really great at doing. Maybe in a smaller startup, you have more, ownership to do that and show your quality. Whereas at a bigger startup, you might not have as much chance to go off of the script, right? Because they have these rules, these regulations, and really somebody's over there telling you what you kind of need to do and how you need to kind of already do it because it's already been built.
I think one of the reasons for that is also like the lack of room of growth, what you just mentioned. Because I also recognize it at Polar, for example, or my own NGO, that you have like from day one a lot of responsibility, but the motivation behind it to overtake this responsibility is also very big. Because, for example, you get equity in the company, you get like huge benefits. There's a huge potential for you also, like when you secured funding and grow within the company. For example, what was the case when it came to me, I got promoted quite fast and started originally as an unpaid intern. I basically cold called the founder that I wanted to join, got promoted pretty fast. And those are all those benefits. And to be honest, because I recognized that there are so many advantages when it comes to like working in very fast-paced environments or startups or projects, I can't really imagine to go to a bigger corporation where everything is already set in stone. You have like 5 other people who do the same stuff at you.
Same shit, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to say shit, but I didn't want
you
to.
You can say it. Say shit.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I didn't want to bring your podcast to an explicit side or so.
Yeah, it's not explicit, but I get it. Yeah. Say what you feel. I totally agree. There are a lot of advantages there, and that's something that I've also realized too, especially living out in Silicon Valley. Is roughly the base house or average of the houses here are roughly around like at least 1 million or 1.2 just for a standard house. Whereas anywhere else around the world, it's way less than that, or maybe it's like 100K or 200, and you have a big mansion, right? Almost, right?
Yeah.
But here, it's just everything's overpriced. Everything's overpriced here. And so what that does is that encourages you or the individuals to mostly chase after the money, right? The money, the green, right? So usually hear that. People want to chase after the green, the dinero. So this is typically what happens here. And it makes sense. It makes total sense because we're looking at things from a perspective of how much can I get versus how much can I put forth effort. And when you're at smaller startups, you do take the risk that you might lose everything you work for. At bigger companies, you take the risk that, hey, look, I already know exactly what I'm going to be making and plan ahead accordingly, right? It's not usually going to change so much, but you don't have that much room to growth or scale up, right? You know, your startup is at a seed round and now it hits to a C round. Now that same equity that you've put in there is now worth, you know, depending on who you are in the ranks, is now worth, you know, millions. You're not going to get that at a big company like a Google or et cetera.
On the other side, the risk is also pretty great. I wouldn't say that joining startups would be a thing for everyone, because like the probability of really of joining a startup as one of the first employees and going through like up to an IPO or private sale or so, it's a pretty long run. And the advantage of being young and already like be in some sort of position is that if Polar fails, for example, or any other project that I will start or be part of like in the next 2 or 3 years, no one will actually care because I'm still young, and being risky is more easily for me than for some sort of like I would say like some senior Google engineer who already earns like 200K per year, has already some sort of reputation as well, and who has to risk like his whole work life or professional career for one adventure in a startup, but still has to feed like his children, for example.
Yeah, you gotta feed the kids, man. You gotta feed the kids.
Yeah,
kids
exactly.
need food. You know, like little worms and birds. You know, hey, yeah, man. I get it. Yeah, you got to do it. Yeah, man. I mean, I totally agree. I agree with you 100%. And I think where I'm at is, you know, you're right. The younger you are, the more risk you can take. But at the same time, you have to think about this as well. You know, sometimes you don't know the time. So sometimes you got to take risk no matter what. Sometimes it might take you longer to grease those elbows, right? It may take you longer to get where you need to be before you can actually take a lot of the risk you really want to take. So think about it, for example, a guy like, you know, I'm not going to ride Elon Musk's, you know, his horse, but if you look at guys like Elon Musk, for example, he's been taking risk his entire, you know, life, you know, moving from South Africa to Canada to United States, and, you know, not joining into a big company because he thought he wouldn't get hired, and then just said, hey, well, let me just start up my own. And luckily that panned out for him. Then he, you know, did another thing, and then it kind of merged with PayPal. And then out of PayPal, he leveraged that, you know, good 200 some odd million and put that all into a couple other companies he wanted to do because he built up that leverage. But once it took him to get to at least PayPal to where he had to take those baby steps to make bigger risk. Right. So he took a lot of his bigger risks in his later point of his life. Right. And what I mean by that is he made all this money and he said, you know what, I'm just going to fucking throw it away. But at the same time, he knew he could make that money back because he had these great friends who were now all millionaires or billionaires at that point. Your Peter Thiels who invested in Facebook, your Reid Hoffmans that put their money in you know, and founded LinkedIn and numerous startups and also in investment firms. Right. So if we're looking at it, there was no really loss.
The PayPal mafia, actually.
Exactly. So was there really a loss? Would he really ever go broke at the point when he was at PayPal? And I mean, sorry, when they built PayPal and they exited and sold it? No, all of his buddies were millionaires, or some may have been billionaires at the time.
I would say like it really much depends. There's a very interesting study that showed like that founders around the age of 45 have the highest probability of building like something very successful. So the level of failure is like bigger. Or let me say it in another way: you can fall off a longer way when you're older, but the probability of really losing your project or to fail it becomes also like a bit smaller. So there's like a trade-off, and you definitely have to find your individual age of funding something. because like you also get more experience, which is also like an advantage that younger people do not necessarily have.
Right. And you kind of know what you want, right? You kind of know what you want.
Yeah.
You've had a couple of failures and you've built yourself from resources. So I think the reason why I was saying that is because earlier we were talking about this whole myth of, if you're young, you can take more risk. You see a lot of articles where a lot of, media, gurus have basically quoted these things. And I've always thought those didn't sound completely right. Everybody has their different path and it takes time to build credibility. And even when you get, but don't get me wrong. I mean, you can't be at the length of PayPal where you've made 200 some odd million, then go work for, Google as a PM.
Yeah.
Like there is a certain room of trajectory that you can't go back on, or it just looks weird. Right. But I'm just saying, like, to a certain perspective, certain people can, get to a later age and start making bigger risk and continuously make risks their entire lives. It does come with some downside, right? I do agree. It comes with some, it's better to do it when you're young. I mean, Elon Musk, I'm not quoting on anything of his life. I don't know, but it seems to be that he's paid the price with his relationships and his family in some sense, right? Divorces,
health as well.
Health. Yeah. Divorces. I mean, he did gain a little bit of weight recently. He gained a little bit of weight. Love it, Elon, but you gained a little bit of weight. Got to get that gym back going on. But, we love you. We love you. Working hard for us. We appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it does pay a price, building shit pays a price. It does. Yeah. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
Younger, the better, the easier it is to do that. And you have more ability and flexibility visually and financially and social pressures to react. But there's something else that I do think about, Julius, too, that, I could also sit there and touch on, is that I always sit there and say to people, if you can look back to any point in time of your life, is really go back and think about what you would do different. And one of those is building, I would think more easier way is building credibility with credible companies initially, and then leveraging and then taking that money and that credibility initially when you're really young, and then putting that money and spreading it out in different types of investment funds or whatever it may be. And then also keeping some of that money to build startups, because now you might have raised, maybe you made $200K for 5 years, right? Maybe you got taxed like 30% or whatnot. Think about all that money that you have now. What could you do with that money? You could have invested some of that money. You could have put some of that money into now a startup. You have runway to kind of build something for the next 2 or 3 years.
That's actually that's actually the typical way of anyone, or of the majority of people who are very interested in being like some sort of part of the startup ecosystem. Just go to any consultancy directly after graduating, earn a ton shit of money, and then join a startup or found your own startup, or go into a VC and be like join as an associate or so, and then do your own thing. I would say this is also like the smartest way. I just do not really consider it for myself, because I'm not really that type of guy who can work for anyone else in that sense. I was always like a pretty much self-starter. So even though I always knew that this is not like the most optimal way, for me it was the right way, because I also like learned a lot in the last couple of years and months especially. But yeah, I definitely agree to you. I would say like earning a lot of money or working like for let's say Google or Facebook as an engineer on the management level is like of huge benefit, because you can also like come more easily to investors, for example, when you have like some sort of pretty much good reputation at a bigger company.
Yeah, that's totally right, man. And you know what, you realize that in retrospect. But I think when I was at your point, I was thinking, like, even myself personally was like, well, wait a minute, but I need to do these things now. I was thinking the way that you were thinking strategically. And, because you mentioned some things. And I have that same type of DNA where it's just like, sometimes going and And oh, do we got you? Do we got you? Can you hear me, Julius? Hold on. Oh, back to what I was saying. What I was saying to you earlier was like, before we had the interruption, is that I have the similar DNA where it's just like I feel like working with other people and collaboration is awesome and it's great, but some people just have this inherent like, I don't know, what is it where they can just like, they feel like they're better to build things with people than to work for other people, and people take that in the wrong way. They take it in a way where it's like, oh, well, you're not a good collaborator, right? But some people just aren't good employees, and there's a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree, because also when I think back to my school time, for example, I was never really the one who liked group works, because I just always wanted to do my work, really prove myself, and then compare it afterwards with others. But I was never really the guy who really wanted to collaborate like directly from second number one. And I would say like this is like some sort of syndrome which I always had like throughout my life.
Yeah, but is it like a syndrome, do you think, or is it just more like it's like just inherent in your DNA? Is there like a leader DNA? I know there's like discoveries or research about leader DNA of some sense, and it's like it feels almost like an itch. You just know it, right? It's like you just know it. It's like it's really hard. You're joined into these teams to work for other people, and it's different from when you're joining in these teams to build something with others, because you're more of a self-starter. You're more of a person who contribute at a higher level. You're not a person that's morely like about, putting wood on the fire, right? Where you're just, the fire's already started and you're just continuously just putting on the wood, and you're just good at putting the wood on the fire to maintain it, versus somebody who can come in and say, hey, how do we start the fire with a group of people? And from the beginning, right? We grab these rocks. How do we start it? There's a different type of person or DNA in that person who can start the fire and then, bring on more people. It's different. It's totally different. Yeah.
I'm also not quite sure if it's like part of my DNA. I would definitely say that it's like this intrinsic drive is, I would say, also generally speaking, part of the ambition of a person. But I definitely would say that like having a leadership position was always like the most fun thing for me. I always wanted to be like in a leading position, always wanted to do my own thing. Also always was very ambitious to get like the best position as possible. But like, I would say it would be quite interesting to look like behind like the science behind like ambition, for example. I think that would be a cool thing if there's like some sort of like DNA or part of the DNA or hormone like existent when it comes to like this entrepreneurial drive.
There is studies of a gene that they've coined. I'm not sure how it is now, or is adjusted, but there are studies of what they call a leadership gene. People who are just like, who are driven to lead. They just like, throughout human time, there were these type of leaders. There were these people who were just, they had to lead. It wasn't like an ego thing specifically. It was just like they just had this gene that they needed to lead, or they had to lead. They just knew it. They just were alpha. And I think it sounds cool to be alpha, but not everybody is alpha. It's just like when but then there's these people who want to be alphas because it sounds cool. That's the problem you have in startups too.
Has it something to do with those personality types? For example, when I like start a project or onboard like a new employee of me, I always do like those personality types, because like from my experience, it's always like quite good to also keep the whole team efficient, to know like what's the personality type of a different person is. For example, engineers are mostly like INTP, for example. I am ENTP, or ENTJ, for example. Has it something to do with that?
It is a part of a personality, right? Right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but within things, you have people who can, who can take on personalities that are not naturally within them. Those are the wantrepreneurs, right? The people who they saw a Zuckerberg movie and now they want to build Facebook, right? There's a lot of wantrepreneurs because movies, and that's what changes.
If you watched the movie, I mean, I was wondering, like, who does not want to build Facebook after watching this movie?
A lot of people did, man, but that also started a lot of wantrepreneurs, right? And some people actually became successful. I mean, let's just be honest. They ended up being successful because they saw the movie, it inspired them, and they just built something. And some people just got fucking lucky. Some people got lucky, and they built some shit, and then now they became what they really weren't great at doing, but they got on enough, and it might have just kickstarted and it did something. So now who's to say there are or there aren't? It depends. But I was
according to that, there's also like one interesting thing I pretty much recognize, like in the last couple of days.
Right.
I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with the Winklevoss brothers.
Yeah,
exactly. They pretty much like got fucked by the court, or by Zuckerberg actually. But still managed to be billionaires, both of them, and
in crypto,
like huge success. Yeah, exactly. Even after this, also started Gemini, or Gemini. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. In the US,
you got it right.
But yeah, I have the feeling that some people are just programmed to be successful. It's a very interesting phenomenon, actually, that they still, like, after this huge failure and setback, still manage to be even more successful than they would be without it, actually.
I mean, there's people that are competitive, and then there's these people who have ambition, and there's a thin line between competitiveness and ambition. And I believe that you can be competitive and also have that ambition that makes you competitive, but some people might have it for unnatural reasons, right? Some people can have that ambition or, that relevanceness to, push on to build something because they're just competitive in the sense that they just want to win. But I believe kind of like, how do I say this? Let me back it up. I think that humans are inherently competitive in general. Just some are a little bit more competitive than others. Because typically, if you notice, as you grow through life, you always have a friend who are always trying to measure themselves next to you. Subconsciously. Doesn't matter what you do. You're going to do it. Everybody's going to do it. Your parents are going to do it. Where was I at when I was your age? Oh, well, Julius, you have to do it this way, Julius. At my age in Frankfurt, I was your age and I did this, and you should do it too. And you should be better than me, or you're lower than me, whatever it may be, whatever's in their mind. People are going to typically measure themselves. And that was my fake German accent, guys. I can do it better. Anyways.
He really can. He proved that, like, before the recording, actually.
Yeah. I was trying to, pay homage to, Germany. Yeah. Love Germany. Anyways. Yeah. I think people just inherently just do this. They do this. They summon this energy that's naturally drives the human race, right? So they're always competing against each other. But I believe that there's some people who are uniquely the drivers in the community. They're just like natural leaders to be the forefront team, right? The group. I'm going to coin it here, call them the founders, right? Every group or following has the founders, right? And these founders are the driving force to push humanity to another, node, right? Let's use some computer stuff. They're gonna push things to the next node, right? And then so on and so on. But within those founders, those founders can also separate and create new additional founders groups, and then build other bigger things and keep on permeating the actual founder gene or grouping and building different things and changing the world. I mean, you've seen guys like, what was it? Steve Jobs, right? he went on to another team and, got with some really good people who, kind of had that similar founder gene, and he helped, do that and go to another company and do it, and go to another company and do it. And he would just collaborate and find these group of people who had that founder gene, and they would all just build these great things. He was the main leader within that. He had a little bit more stronger, push and drive, but he still was able to keep on moving himself into different companies or ideas, and then create this little founder core group, right? Like, what's his name? Tim Cook, right? Tim Cook, and then the designer of Apple, right? Who did the iPhone stuff. I think his name's something I forgot. I know his name, but I'm just totally forgetting right now. But yeah, same thing, these are the core founder type of people to build the company and push it forward. But then they could separate and they can continuously build. Some are a little bit stronger than the other, but inherently they do these amazing things. They're amazing fucking things. You get my point.
I think you really much described, like, I'm not quite sure. Are you familiar with Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1?
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, he also like talked about, like, for anyone who does not know the book, he pretty much describes like that you always should aim for being a monopolist, and try to avoid competitive, like, some sort of behavior, and really start your own thing in your own niche. And I think that this really much drives like real innovative ideas. For example, when you look at PayPal, when you look at Tesla or Amazon or any some sort of like those companies, they always like were the first ones in their niche, or at least make it like significantly better than like the competitors.
I agree. There's some things I agree with Peter Thiel on, and there's some things I kind of disagree on. But we'll talk about some of them that I agree on. And by the way, 0 to 1, I do have that book, Peter Thiel. You signed that book, and yeah, I keep it. Yeah, thanks. Awesome. Yeah, I did that. Peter Thiel. Yeah, he signed my book, 0 to 1, over here in Palo Alto a couple years back. Yeah, when it first launched out, book tour. Yeah. But it's another story. But I agree. He does mention how you need to take a monopoly, right? You need to take a monopoly, and you need to go into a sector that doesn't have much competitiveness, and competitiveness is actually bad, right? These are some of the energies that he kind of pushes in the actual book of 0 to 1. But at the same time, let me play devil's advocate. Ooh. What about Facebook? What about fucking Facebook? Facebook wasn't the first social media.
Yeah, MySpace was before Facebook, right?
Well, let's go further. Let's go even deeper, right? So now let's go back all the way to the first social network that we know of, that was in fruition, or that was, some spark of an idea. And that was actually Peter Thiel's, I would say, best friend, and also co-founder in PayPal, Reid Hoffman, where he built, I think it was called SocialNet or Social something. I forgot what I think SocialNet or something net. He built first. It was actually the first idea that was known or publicized of a social network. But it didn't, Peter Thiel told him pretty much to, if I'm remembering this exactly right, he said, hey, Reid, stop that, what you're doing right now. Hold on for a second. Come with me. Do this PayPal thing. Then after this PayPal thing, exits, you can go ahead and do this social network type of thing. And then you're going to have that power. You're going to have that reinforcement to be able to do what the fuck you want. Fuck you money. Fuck you money. That's what we call it. We call it fuck you money. Fuck you. I got money. I can do what I want. And he built that reputation.
What great words.
Huh?
Those are so great words. Music in my ears. And I think it's the same case for every founder, actually. And then he built LinkedIn, right?
Yes, because remember, as I said, he built SocialNet, which was the first widely documented Silicon Valley or story of an actual first social network that was known, that would have been the predecessor of any of the social networks that we know of kind of today for the most part. Of course, there were other ideas before that, obviously, but this was like the main one that kind of comes by the similar structure. Or was it SocialNet, or was it called 6 Degrees? Something like that. But anyways, there was after that there was another one from a founder of what was it? There was a founder from Google who built another social network after that, or during that period of time. And then after that, there was what was that other one? It was the one that Mark Zuckerberg discovered, and he copied that one. Friendster. There was Friendster.
All right, yeah.
Friendster. And Friendster, and there was, like I said, there was another one at the same time as Friendster that kind of popped out by a Google founder, and it was big in Brazil and big in other countries. And those were kind of the biggest ones at the time. And at that time, Reid Hoffman had stopped the little social networking thing, and he had moved over to with Peter Thiel and the other PayPal founders and built out PayPal. But then it exited. But in between that time, there was a guy named Mark Zuckerberg who was basically building this other product that he leveraged the idea of Friendster. And he built a better Friendster, which was, we call Facebook, or the Facebook at the time. And then he just, kept on going. But then after that, then there was MySpace, right? Friendster fell down, and then MySpace was there. And then when MySpace was there, what ended up happening is MySpace ended up selling the company. Well, actually, MySpace was built inside of another company called Intermix Media, right? And it was brought by Fox, right? Well, the parent company of Fox, and Rupert Murdoch. And what he did is he sold the fucking company. Actually, the two founders, Tom and Chris DeWolf, went to go visit Facebook in San Francisco, and on their visit, they were in hopes or in discussions to kind of buying Facebook from Mark Zuckerberg. But as they arrived back to LA in Beverly Hills at MySpace headquarters inside of Intermix Media, it was already sold. So MySpace was already sold without the two founders' decision.
Wow.
Yeah, because they didn't own the company. A lot of people don't know this, but MySpace founders never owned the actual the actual property of the company, right? The IP wasn't theirs. It was built with Intermix Media's computers, hardware, servers, money, and everything. And then they kind of raised money with different things. But from what I understand, it was built with the resources of another company. So, for example, if you're in this company, Polar AI, and you want to go and start using their resources to build another startup on top of that with their resources, now you might say you're the CEO of this new company, but really you did it with Polar AI's resources. So now Polar AI actually owns your actual company, and so you can't make decisions about something that you started off of their resources. It's actually their company.
Kind of like a very bad and too dominant accelerator, right?
Yeah, exactly. So pretty much what happened is they just sold the company. So when they got back off, the company was sold, I think, roughly for like $500 million or something like that. And yeah, they got a cut of that. And yeah, I think Tom just travels the world. Chris is now in gaming. They were on top of the world at one time. And, Facebook, once that happened, there was no other players in sight but Facebook. So Facebook had to hit critical mass. And Peter Thiel understood that in order for Facebook to dominate it, which was monopolize it, as you say, 0 to 1, he had to get rid of competitors. And he had to hit critical mass to where Facebook was a utility, where it was like a phone service, something people needed to do, which is where it is now.
Yeah.
And if there weren't a few, I don't know, I would say even more like some godly things that happen, there would not be Facebook in its place of now, because MySpace was still killing at the time, right? But once it got sold off to Fox, it went down. The graphics got heavier. Yeah. Shit on the site just got trashier, and the rest is history. And then Facebook opened up out of colleges to everyone, because now it didn't have any competitors like MySpace. It was the only kid in town. Yeah. So 2 years later, it opened up to that, and then here we are.
Execution and growth is actually like a very important thing, because also like when you look at the different growth strategies that really boosted their the user numbers, like of course opening up to other colleges at that time was like a huge part of that, or to the mass actually, but also like providing different languages within the app. having like a mobile app actually when like all this kind of topic around like smartphones and app stores some sort like popped up, and that really boosted their user number. So it's also like quite interesting how much influence like time or innovation in general has like on the success of one particular app.
Yeah, I mean, that does matter. But I feel like when you're at a point where MySpace was versus Facebook, one was more of a true Silicon Valley company and had that spirit and had the proper investment people behind them, the smarter people behind it versus, the business people like in MySpace at the time. Everybody there was predominantly business guys. They were LAized, right? They had this, let's just build something, flip it, make some money off of it. We're rich. Who cares? It was a different type of entrepreneurship. Whereas, Silicon Valley gave a lot of different disciplines, like, let's build a company long term. How do we, structurally keep Mark Zuckerberg in power and make sure that he can build Facebook to be that billion-dollar company where investors aren't telling him where the company can go, right? Because if that didn't happen, and when he signed up with Peter Thiel, guess what would have happened? He would have been, just like MySpace. The company would have sold off to some investors who would have had higher share or equity, and they would have just sold off the company and made decisions for the company and sold it to another company. Because remember, many companies wanted to buy Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? How big should the influence of those like typical businessmen, for example, that were like involved in MySpace, be in a startup today? Because, like, in my opinion, kind of an influence of like those real typical businessmen are very important for the long-term success of a startup. But too much influence is also like providing a startup of having like real innovative ideas and like preventing to breathe like this entrepreneurial spirit and drive.
But what's the question around that? Are you asking me like what? Like, I guess I want to zero in on the question.
How big should the impact of those real businessmen be in a startup?
I think their impact shouldn't be as much. They should be more people who are your advisors, right? Think Julius Caesar, right? Julius, let's think Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar had predominant, power and say, he had influence over his team, right? But because of that also power, what ended up happening is, his team members, his founder group, ended up assassinating him through jealousy because they knew he had too much power, right? They couldn't take it from him, right? So you think about Zuckerberg, a modern day technology, Julius Caesar, where, he's even, styling his hair like he's a Greek. He's fascinated about the Greeks, by the way, if you didn't know that. Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it that way, he's positioned himself as the Julius Caesar. And the only way you can really get rid of Zuck, which you have the government's trying to jump in and doing different ways, is unless somebody internally just like gets rid of him. Because you can't get rid of him because legally he is the man, right? You can't shake the structure. He has to step down. If he doesn't step down, no one can move him. He has the iron fist. He is the dictator of the Meta, right? They changed the name Meta from Facebook. So these are things that are awesome, right? To push the innovation in a different direction. And you have whistleblowers, you have all kinds of stuff going on, but inherently, if you think about it, I think that a founder should have this full, you should have the full, power to be able to dictate and say what they kind of envision for the future. Because when these leaders or managers or funding people kind of get in, they kind of distort your direction. And you're the person that kind of built the baby.
What do you think? Would it be of an advantage for Facebook or Meta actually to get rid of Mark Zuckerberg? Because, like, of course, in my opinion, like, Facebook did a lot of things wrong in the past, especially like in the last couple of like 3 to 4 years. But because I'm also like a big fan of the metaverse and this whole like trend around it, and everyone is currently speaking about the metaverse and those changes, I think Meta or Facebook actually did a right step to enter like a new, very innovative area with a lot of potential.
But I agree with you. But how? But Zuckerberg did that, right? I mean, he pushed it in the direction of Meta. I mean, he's been the idea guy. But I guess maybe I'm confused on what you're asking. Are you saying, yeah, explain that one more time. I'm confused. I'm asking a lot of questions twice, but go ahead.
Do you think it would be an advantage for Facebook or Meta to get rid of Mark Zuckerberg, even though he's like this big idea driver?
I think no. I think you need Zuckerberg to some extent. The company's vision in the long run has not matured 100%. You might look at it and say, okay, well, Facebook is, hit globalization, but companies like that need consistent innovation throughout time. What is the next platform for Facebook? Social networking is kind of done. Apps are mostly kind of saturated. So what else? What is the next platform? And I think a lot of founders or people in the founder DNA gene, or maybe people even outside of it, are thinking like, what's the next new hot platform? What's next?
The real life.
Right. I mean, because we did the internet with with our web devices. Then we went to mobile, but now we're on mobile. Now what's next? Like, what's the future? So is it the metaverse? Right? Is it AR? I mean, AR. Is that the thing? Augmented reality? Is augmented reality the future? Is it's like a hybrid, or is it just the whole VR thing, the virtual reality, like Meta? And I think they're vetting in both. But I think the thing is, you need a guy like Zuck to be able to vision that out and push that out and drive the force. And people like to follow a leader. They like to follow a leader, somebody who's won in the past.
Yeah.
You had Napoleon. People follow Napoleon because he had some success and some smarts in the game. People want to follow that. So and just like Julius Caesar, right? People want that leadership.
Especially in times where people are like very confused, or where like times are not very, yeah, exactly. They just to have like some sort of faith or hope for a better time, and they want to give up like responsibility from themselves to let someone others lead them and to solve their personal situation.
And not even that, somebody who just has good vision. There's a difference of a visionary versus just somebody who's just founding a company. A visionary is a person that can see things that an average founder doesn't see, right? They can see something like magnificent. They have these, these massive ambitious goals. Like, why don't we go to Mars and settle? You need a really, really, really alpha plus to be able to push off that type of innovation or initiative in general, right? So when you're thinking about that, hey, I'm going to build a social network, but this social network is everybody in the world is going to be on it, and they have to use it daily. That's a big ambition, right? You know?
And also coming up like with constantly with new ideas.
I mean, that's where you get, you get great people to work for you. You get smarter people to work on you on small things. This is something I always say. This is where it comes into getting, finding people's superpower and putting people in the right positions. Zuckerberg did a great job, and as a leader, of doing so, right? That's what's also made him a great founder. He discovered the superpowers of certain individuals and put them in the power and gave them this full anonymity to, do what they want to do and do what's needed for the company, not what they wanted to do, what's best for the company and the direction. And he agreed on, and I'm pretty sure there's some overlap of his ideas with their ideas, and then they just push it forward. And, he puts these people in certain powers. But at the same time, if you start off in a lower level within these companies, they'll never see your superpower.
Yeah. But I think a founder's nothing without the team, actually. Because especially when you're in a tech startup, I mean, I would say it's a different thing when you start just a small business than, for example, like a real tech startup, especially when you have like a non-technical background, as I do, for example. I really much appreciate like every technical or engineer in general I work with together, because they also have like another approach to everything you really mentioned or come up with, and they really sharpen your actual product at the end.
You said they're actually what at the end?
They actually sharpen your idea or product at the end to make it way more efficient than it would be originally without like this technical opinion.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think anytime you're building some type of technical tool or product or physical thing, you need technical advice because, they are going to build it. So at some point they can simplify it, but at the same time, a lot of technical people cannot simplify it. actually you can have a founder who understands technology or knows enough to be able to navigate it on how the experience should be. Does that make sense? So what I mean by that is, example, Steve Jobs, I'm going to coin it. Not every founder is Steve Jobs, of course. But for example, Steve Jobs was a guy, who wasn't technical, but he knew what you needed to get out of that experience. He knew how to judge the user experience. He was a design and
marketing mastermind, actually.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And when it comes to like startups or like innovative companies like itself, there are two sides that are very important. Like on the one side, like the technical or engineering side, and on the other side, like growth. And this also includes like design pretty much. And when it comes to like scaling a startup, which I also like pretty much now experience at Polar, growth and the connection between engineering and growth becomes more and more important. As soon as you really want to grow your user base or the company itself.
Yeah, that matters. But I mean, I think in general, you need somebody who understands the vision. You need somebody who understands the technical constraints, because sometimes you can have many engineers who don't understand the usability of a product. As a matter of fact, studying, computer science and things like that is like, for me, I realized a lot of engineers didn't understand the fundamentals of building a great user experience. They understood how to build products, but not a great user experience. This is where you have product designers who come in, the whole, skills, the whole product team and join it in. And then you also have like your product managers, your user researchers as you grow and scale. But, earlier on, your product designers will actually, handle a lot of those things, and also your product manager. They'll wear a lot of those hats with the actual engineers to help guide them in a direction for more usable product and do usability testing and things like that. But sometimes some engineers just inherently have enough just to get it kicked off to where it can grow, right? Sometimes they don't need it. Sometimes they have just enough to do it. Zuckerberg was, he was amazing, or at least I would say a pretty solid state of the art, user experience guy. I mean, he thought about the whole experience, and he also did, he designed it, he developed it, he did everything, because at that time there was not that much of this is a product designer, this is engineer. It was just like, hey, when you build an app or you build a website, you have to also design it. It was just the way it was. There wasn't a separation.
What would you do with a new employee that doesn't really, like, for example, what would you do with a new engineer of one of your startups that doesn't really get your vision for the whole product when you would be a founder, but still like understands how the product works and also understands like how the user thinks about your product? What would you do with that? Would you still hire him, or like involve him in the company itself, or would you get rid of him or her?
That's a tricky question. I think you have to really, whether how that person is valuable. And then you also have to look at yourself and say, well, hey, what is about the vision do they not get? Is it my lack of communication, or maybe they're just not getting the way I'm explaining it to them? Sometimes it could just be you, right? Sometimes it can just be us, right? Sometimes it could be the way that we're explaining it. It actually doesn't interpret to that other individual. And sometimes we have to reevaluate ourselves instead of just being, oh, well, this person doesn't get it, so maybe they just don't get it, so let me just hire somebody else. Maybe they just don't get what you're saying. Maybe you're a bad communicator at the actual vision, or maybe that person just doesn't get how you're expressing it. So I would work on first, simplifying the idea and the vision. And you also want to highlight what they actually really aren't getting, right? Like, what is it they're not getting about what you're saying as an idea, right? Because you need to really signify that, and to not know that, kind of, I can give you a vague description of what I would be doing. But I think overall, I would work on how I'm communicating that, or where they're stuck at, where they don't get certain things, right? Because every idea should have some simplistic understanding or logic or whatever you're trying to bet on, right? Some type of direction you're trying to bet on. It should be logical, right? It shouldn't be something that it has to be super complicated where another person can't get it, right? I think that's also part of the pitch, right? You know what they say as founders and, people building companies, you have to have that pitch, that elevator pitch, to be able to describe it to that investor immediately to where they get it. And that's where the founder's job is, to articulate that to be the most easily digestible, right? Elevator pitch to where everyone can typically get it. I always want to say you want to make that elevator pitch so simplistic that a child should be able to get it. You should be able to tell a 7 or 8 year old what your startup does. And if they don't get it, that means you fucking suck. And it happens. We suck. We have to work on our pitch. Founders have to work on our pitch.
I totally agree to that.
Oh, I was going to say, sorry about that. I was going to say, Julius, sorry about that. There's a difference. What I wanted to mention there is like, there's a difference of somebody who doesn't really feel your direction, who doesn't think it's possible, versus I don't really understand what you're just telling me. There's a difference, because some people might not believe in it, and we might interpret that as they don't get it, right? They might not believe in the direction you're going into completely. They might not be sold. Sometimes that happens over time. But typically what I like to say is I like to find people, I like to make sure that they understand the purpose of the project or the goal of the company, and they love it more than I do, because those people are going to work harder than you will sometimes. Sometimes you want people that are just love the idea just as more as passionately than you do. And I've heard like guys like Gary Vee, he'll sit there and go on a rant and be like, no, this is your baby. Nobody's ever going to work harder than you on your baby. There's some truth to that. But there's also some falsity to that. And what I'll say behind that is people, if you look back when, and I'm going to give this example at, Zuckerberg, when he built Facebook, he had Dustin Mousevitz, his roommate, who just didn't know how to code. But this dude says, hey, I want to join the company. And, Zuck's like, hey, well, Dustin, you don't know how to code. He's like, yeah, but wait a second, give me a week or whatever it may be. He comes back, he reads an entire book of C++, and he said, hey, I'm ready. Within a short time. That's busting his ass. He showed that he took on initiative to basically, be, how would you say, to be that actual person. Ooh, sorry about that. But I was talking about Dustin Mousevitz, of how he showed, that initiative to be that other person. He showed that he would be that other founder. He went above and beyond where he had to be. He just didn't say, okay, Mark Zuckerberg, he knows everything. I can just be like a little salesperson and maybe help him out here and there. He went above and beyond. Whereas times when Zuckerberg, was kind of forgetting about the idea, and he was wanting to do work on new projects because he's a entrepreneur. He wants to flip ideas. He has so many ideas. He wants to try new things. And, it was guys like Dustin Mousevitz and his founding team were like, no, let's work on this. And they kept it going, and Zuck would have given up a long time ago.
That's especially important, I would say, like in the first days of a startup, because like there will be times that are so fucking hard. There are times or days where you just want to give up, and like having a team around you that really goes above and beyond for your project, for your own project actually, and just to have like this belief in your own project is like such a great support, and also like motivates yourself to also like having or filling out this leadership position that you have.
To answer that question back again, to clarify that, I would, first make sure that I'm explaining the actual solution or the problem correctly, and revisiting that and making sure my elevator pitch is approachable or acknowledgeable to even a child. And then I would go from, once I feel that it's there, and I've proven that through talking to many people and simplifying that process to where people who don't know about your space get it. And then once I feel I have that, then I would actually go ahead and then I would revisit that other person and think about, do they level up to that? And if they still understand what the goal of the company kind of is, but they don't believe in the 100, they don't know exactly if it's going to be where it needs to be, that's okay. But at some point, you want them to be able to have that ambition and passion past you, or at least as a similar level to you, to where they believe in the product too, because sometimes you may drift off. And it's not all the time that you should, but it happens because you get excited and you just want to build stuff. And, you need somebody to keep you on track. Say, hey, wait a minute. This is great, but let's keep on working on this, man, to keep you on track. Because sometimes you just need it, man. Sometimes you need that therapy. Yeah.
I think also like the first step, which you mentioned, has a lot of to do with getting feedback from your employees as well. Just to have like, because nobody is perfect, especially founders, not who might be like also like too ambitious about a product idea, for example, or a specific feature that they really want to implement, but actually it's quite shitty. So also like getting regular feedback, it's a very powerful thing, and you only can grow from it. And it also like keeps the, on the one side, the atmosphere and the whole startup and in the team up, but also the efficiency. Well, donation is actually like a topic of my second project, ThirdAid, which is my NGO. But at Polar, we connect like artificial intelligence with learning and researching. I pretty much call it like Google, but for your own repository. We also have a lot of upcoming features coming out soon, mostly related to AI as well, but also to note taking. For example, like think about Notion. I would say like this is the most known service for that. It's a great tool. I definitely can recommend it. We are still in private beta. So yeah, just sign up and wait for us to be released. But we already have like a couple of thousand monthly active users that are already in private beta with and early revenue, and we want to raise like our first round, hopefully when everything goes well, beginning of next year. That's it basically.
Yeah. Well, how are you making ends meet right now? I mean, like, how are you paying the rent? Yeah.
I of course get salary and also equity, gladfully. That's it. And this is also like the way how I fund actually as well my NGO, because my dream was always to have like on the one side like a social project and on the other side like a real job or like a real startup for profit for myself. Just to have like both sides
So
covered.
I mean, you're building a startup, right? You're building a startup, and then you also work for another startup.
And I'm also a full-time student, so yeah, I don't get a lot of sleep
How does the other startup feel about you being a full-time student and also having your own startup? And then how are they letting you do that? Like a lot of people feel like, there's a lot of jealous companies out there who feel like, oh, well, he's going to be working on my time, building his own startup. Maybe that's a Silicon Valley thing, but I feel like there's jealousy.
I would say they're just tolerated because it's a non-profit project. And because they also know that where my priority number one really lies. And I'm pretty good, or like I became really good at time management. I did a lot of mistakes where I just like completely forgot about my sleep, for example, or my health. Didn't do like any sports for a couple of months actually. That gladfully improved, but I pretty much recognized that if you structure your day in different blocks, it is like a very powerful tool. For example, I like spend like 2 or 3 hours directly in the morning for my university to get all of my shit done. And then I will completely focus on Polar at first and then ThirdAid. And it really works. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I don't know. It's different now. I think like for your unique scenario, I think I understand what you're saying. But for many other scenarios, there's a lot of jealousy within the space where people feel like, they feel like you can't do anything else. And I think that's almost bad because you want to show that there's these other people that you helped nurtured in a company. And now look what they've done. It creates like this culture where it's like, hey, imagine if all these people from Polar AI came out, or your other company came out of your company and built other billion-dollar companies. People are looking back at you and saying, Julius Walkenhorst, what did you do? This is amazing.
Yeah, but I would say if ThirdAid would be a for-profit project, actually, I would say that it will be like much more difficult because like there's also like this general rule when it comes to like investors and VCs that they mostly like invest in founders and not real companies. And they really want to see like a 100% commitment to the startup you applied for, basically, or the startup you want to be funded from a VC, because like if you're also involved in other for-profit projects, it doesn't really show like a belief in your own project. And if you do not really believe in your own project as a founder, why should they believe in your project and fund you?
These are the facts. I agree. Why should they do it? Why should they do it? It's amazing. Why should they care if you don't care? But you know what? A lot of that, I get some of those signaling, but sometimes what happens is a lot of investors take this whole signaling thing to the limit. They exaggerate it. Everybody's not exactly the same, but I understand they need to create some systematic process or structure to try to replicate signals of what does success look like. But at the same time, it's not always said and done. Sometimes you might want to work on different projects and you might just do just as well. You can still do your job, but maybe on a Saturday you can work all day doing your own little side thing. I think it keeps your mind healthy. It keeps you, in the ideate mode, right? Where you're just, creating things and you're thinking different, and you might learn some things and you can use some of those things to contribute back from your side projects to contribute back to your core company. But a lot of people don't actually say that. Like typically when I'm building things for, big companies and things like that, I typically don't usually like to talk about the podcast, even though the podcast is soaring and doing good, supposedly, right? And hitting a lot of numbers. It doesn't matter. I try not to bring that into what I do day to day as much as possible, because I feel like it's a conflict of interest, So there'll be people and companies, oh yeah, what do you do? I'm like, well, I mean, I do this, but I also do this and I do some other things. But I try to avoid, get away from the big podcasting thing, because people just feel like, you can feel this like resentment or judgment of like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Why didn't I do a podcast? Or, or fuck, he's doing something exciting. Oh, and it's working out. Or, it's like, and then there's like, oh, well, what happens if he, he's got a lot of people watching and a lot of people are, tuning in. Shoot, how long will he stay here? You have those type of ideas, and it's like, hey, you shouldn't focus on that. If you're creating a great company, a great idea, people are going to hang on. And even if they don't, remember that person worked for your company, so you can build that leverage to bring in better people and more people.
I totally agree to that. And I would say that, especially because of my age, it's also a very good way to test myself of what kind of skills I learned in the last couple of months. For example, when we hired, I think at Polar, like the 10th employee or the 10th team member, I definitely recognized that I was also like very skilled when it comes to like hiring people, scaling up a team, setting up those internal processes. I recognized that this helped me a lot, also like to implement it or to prove myself as well, that I'm able to do it on my own and not like in the set in stone company.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah, because that's a whole nother skill set too. Being able to identify those structures and how you want to hire and these processes, and to make sure they make sense. Because a lot of companies do them in ways where they don't even make any fucking sense. They make you do these ridiculous, like, for example, I have a beef that I feel is redundant. For example, if you're a senior engineer and you've worked at a top tier company, right? Let's say it's Google. Why the hell do you need to re-interview for the same unique skill set that you've proven already at Facebook, for example, or Meta, or, Amazon, or whatever that may be, right? Another top tier FANG company. Why would you need to re-interview your same skill sets to prove what level you are? It's redundant. It's like, once you became Lady Gaga or Michael Jackson, do you need to go fucking, prove that you can sing again and perform? Basically what I was saying to you earlier, Julius, just a second before we dropped off, I was saying, pretty much, what happens, when you already have proven yourself. You've won Grammys, you've won these major awards, but now somebody's asking you, can you act, again, before you get onto this role? And I think some tech companies may look at it as like, oh, we're seeing if you're right for this role, so you're casting for it. But it's like, no, once you've reached a certain point, do you need to cast for that actual, acting role, like, because they know who you are. Like, you've already proven that you can fucking act. You've already proven that you are, Brad Pitt. You've already proven that you're Jimi Hendrix or Kurt Cobain. Right? You've proven yourself. Why do you need to show? Can you play guitar again?
That's completely true. But I mean, I think this pretty much only applies to like this whole top level. Because like I think I had like, I would say 500 to 600 interviews in the last year basically, and I was really surprised by all those engineers who had like quite good and known companies on their CVs, but still didn't really manage to get like simple things done, or to code or to solve like simple coding problems. So I'm definitely in favor to always like test new engineers, especially when you're in an early stage company, because like every employee in a young company has like so much impact that it's very crucial to hire the right people.
I mean, I agree with you. It is really crucial to hire the right people, and you never know who those right people are. And, I get it, but I find it hard to believe that an engineer from Google couldn't work and build problems at a senior level, couldn't work and build problems at a startup. I just find it hard to believe. Of
course not. Like definitely from Google, not. I would say like every startup on the world wouldn't say no to an engineer from Google, of course. But when it comes to like those, let's call them tier 3 or tier 4 companies, I would definitely be in favor of testing those people, because you just never know. Maybe also like a recruiter of this company didn't really care. And from my experience, like testing people is always like a good thing. Also, like when it comes to being a good team fit, this is also very important. I mean, not only those hard skills are like crucial for a company, but also like having a great team atmosphere, for example.
Yeah, I agree with you. Having a team atmosphere, for example, could be, it's good for usually a company. But then there's it's a personal thing sometimes, right? It's personal in general. Like what you might consider could be,
of course. Yeah.
Right. So what you might consider to be a personal fit might not actually be a personal fit. It might also just be another person who's just a I am person or do person, right? You told them they like to do the same things you like to do. So now you have a bunch of people who agree with you, right? They agree with everything you say. They build everything you want, and they don't push the status quo, right? So now you're just building shit from yes people, right? Because you said, hey, I want to hire people who fit the culture. I kind of agree with the culture. I agree with the culture, but I kind of disagree with the culture, because we get too stuck on these terms and these processes that we don't think out of the box. And you don't get thinking out of box solutions by having these processes sometimes, deeply embedded within the companies, right? I get it. There can be cancers. There could be not so good fits, but it's really, I think people need to be careful of what is a good fit, because we have internal biases on what that may be. And we may be hiring a bunch of yes people who just say yes to everything we do. And of course, we like to be complimented. We like people to say, oh, Julius, that fucking sweater you're wearing is amazing. And, you're like, yeah, I picked it out. It's great, right? I love it. And they just say everything you say and everything you do is predominantly good and it's great. I believe in that. They might challenge here and there, but then they just go back to agree with you, whatever you're trying to say. So it's kind of tricky. It's like you want to have these people who kind of think differently, who have a different background and will challenge you. And I think a lot of people are afraid to bring in people who challenge them and will write them off as not a culture fit because they challenge them.
And this is basically the reason why it's very important, in my opinion, to also like have some sort of company principles for a startup, especially what you want to see in your employees. Because I definitely agree to you that you do not want to hire like any yes-saying people only, but also like for me, it's very important to hire only people that have like, for example, very strong ownership of what they're doing, that they are willing to take over responsibility, that they have like some sort of scientific approach and really can like logically explain their opinions, for example, to to a new product feature idea or so. This is definitely important to also challenge yourself as a founder, because it can be very fast that you get into some sort of tunnel when you're a founder, and when it comes to making decisions. It's always good to have like people around you that are really challenge you, and also have like very, very strong ownership about the product and the company itself.
Yeah, I mean, you're right too in there. But I just think, like, in general, it's like we have to be careful about these processes. We have to be careful about structures and all these little, trendy names that we put into our design, or excuse me, within our hiring processes, where we just think like, oh, well, let me just, I think you do need to interview people, obviously, right? You do need to talk to them. You need to fill them out, but you need to try to make sure you have this unbiased, conversation, right? And it's really hard to do that. I'm not saying it's easy. But I think typically what you'll find is a lot of companies will have, this culture that they call culture, but they're actually just yes people. They're a bunch of people who act the same. And so you begin to have this type of culture that is yes people who are just like throwing, they're maintaining the fire. They're not pushing things to the next realm, which is where you get these mundane products of innovation, right? Which is why you have companies like, Meta, who are just, acquiring companies now. They're not innovating shit internally, because the people who probably would be innovating typically aren't getting hired, or if they are, they're smothered by lower positions.
Yeah. What would be like, if imagine you would start like a new company and would scale a team up, what would be for your like questions that you could ask in the hiring process, or like some sort of topics that you could speak about where you identify if someone would be a good team fit for your project, actually?
I mean, that's a big one. But I think a lot of things is I could usually look at somebody's work, depending on what position it is. I really would need to see that, like if it's typically when I'm interviewing an engineer, the whole fucking, do they need to do leak code and all this shit like this? As a startup, I don't need to do that. I can typically say, hey, show me some projects of what you built. And I could typically go use them. And I could check out the functionality of them, how smooth things run, right? How fast is it, lazy load? I could check out some of the functionality, and I can tell if they're intuitive enough, and how in depth they thought about things from an engineering perspective. Design is another thing. You could have did a shitty design, but the engineering, if it's smooth, if it lazy loads smooth, I'm keep on scrolling. They thought about, maybe I'm going to have 10, profile photos, for example, just throwing something silly out there at one call, right? And then I'm going to load another 10, then I'm going to load another 10, then after that, another 5, then maybe another 20, and et cetera. There was a systematic, smooth process that they did through trial and error to figure this out. It was a lot of thought behind it. I can go ahead and use different products and tell where somebody didn't put a lot of thought behind it just through usability testing. I can test products that they've built, right? I can see it. Designer, the same thing. I can see what type of designer that might be a fit for typically my company visually. I can just look at the fucking projects that they've worked on, and I could tell, okay, this person would fit in doing these things. But not everybody can. Of course, there's more cultural questions. Do you fit in? Do you get this energy and vibe from this person? Those things matter too a lot. But at the same time, I can kind of tell their vibe and their energy and their motivation. But if I don't feel safe with that, how I would do things, how I would, re-innovate things is I would never hire anybody first offhand. I would just do contract and then hire. I would do 3 months or maybe 3 to 6 months contract and then hire full time. Pay them at their regular rate that they would be getting paid as if I hired them, and then then full time them in after 3 to 6 months. Instead of hiring somebody on a probation period of 90 days and then firing them, fucking up their resume for some decisions that I felt were my personal opinions, right? Or I felt they personally couldn't do the job, or I personally didn't like them, or I thought they were a bad fit. You don't know those things until you get in there further. You can't guess those things, right? People try to guess those things into these processes, and it's harder. And I think really without seeing people's work and really being a good, like a lot of these recruiters, they'll contact you, but they don't really know how to evaluate a good product. Typically, some of them do, but not all of them do. A lot of them don't know how to evaluate a good engineer. And sometimes maybe they don't have time. And so that is a thing too. So it's like, how do you do this to scale? But I think initially when you're building a startup, you really need to take time to understanding who your building things for? Do you have engineers who really understand, what real smart engineers actually have to go through besides just saying, here's this leak code, solve this problem? Because you can learn those problems. You can learn leak code. You can go online, study these similar processes that that a big company is going to actually put out there for you to learn and to say that you're equivalent or you're smart enough. Once you learn those kind of like copy and paste structures, or problem solutions that they might throw at you, you can just kind of scale that and consistently just pass. Like, that's why there's some people who are great at interviewing. They learn these certain things that they know to get into these companies, and they just copy and paste at any company they go to. And some people who just figure it out, or they try it doesn't match. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
To what you said first, I slightly I wouldn't necessarily say that I disagree with that, but I think from my perspective, there's a lot that comes with it. For example, if you hire like a designer, for example, how does the designer work together with an engineer? This is, for example, only stuff you very have to investigate, because when you like simultaneously scale a team up very fast, you don't have time for anyone in the team or for every new team member that he or she like learns some sort of skills like in the next 1 or 2 months, because like time is so crucial, especially when you're very fast paced. I think that you, even in that time, or like especially in that time, have to be very careful about like who you're hiring, and that you really have to take care about this personal fit, and also like not very hard skill side, but also like those soft skills that are very important. Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I just agree about how hard we push these processes into things, because we may think that we're doing all these things. I typically see people thinking they're doing all these things, and they're thinking they're doing these things by scale. Like all the things you're saying, I see tons of companies will do these same fucking ridiculous tests, and they think that they're doing these things that you're exactly explaining. But the problem is they fucking don't know. I've been in positions where I've interviewed with people and they're like, oh, we're looking for a cultural fit. Oh, we're looking for work with collaboration in teams. Oh, we were looking for, let's say, a designer who's looking for intentionality. I'm like, fucker, listen here, buddy. Has any of your fucking designers ever built anything by themselves? Have they ever gotten any partnership with Fortune 500 companies based off of the shit that they built? Have they? Have they fucking done it? No! The average fucking one has never done it. You know why? Because they're just putting fucking wood on the fire. This is what I'm saying. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But how do you measure that, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, man, it's like we try to do those things. We try to do things. Sometimes you got to do things that don't scale. Paul Graham. And so some of those things have to be, sometimes you have to really reevaluate your hiring process, and you have to think about some things strategically instead of just going about things in a way where you feel like, oh, I've got this process and I need to see if they can work with teams together. Obviously, it's just this fucking guy or this person or woman or whatever it may be built these things previously, and I've investigated this person built some of these things or was involved in these things. Obviously, this person has some sense of something here. So let's just see what those things are. Let's talk to them. Let's fill them out. Let's just be natural. Let's be not so judgmental, but let's just see what we really want to find out. But I think a lot of people, they look into these things and they have these assumptions like, oh, I mean, I've been told, I've done interviews where I've literally been told in the past, like, oh, this person, he lacks intentionality. Who the fuck are you? You never did anything. What did you do? You just got fucking hired here because you copied a process from your friend who worked there, and they told you the fucking process, and you just copied that shit. And then you went to an interview and you said, oh, this is this. This is this. Oh, this is the intentionality. Oh, this is design thinking. So I should look for this and I should do this. And you learned that shit. You learned it. You copied a process because you know the process of entry. And now you just copy that anytime you speak to anybody when it comes to a hiring manager. And now you just learn the hiring process. And now you're in the fucking job and you can just glide because you just copy that same fucking process and people fucking like you, right? But what did you fucking push? Did you innovate anything? No. All you did was throw wood on the fucking fire. This is why you get companies who fucking just sit there and acquire other companies, because at a certain point, they lack innovation because they hire fucking me people. Yes, people. Yes. Oh, he's like me, culture fit, but he's like me. But we don't really know what these people do. We try to figure out how we can measure those things, and we overdo those by just looking at these superficial processes we create and we copied from another company. We read online. What is the hiring process for an engineer? What is the hiring process for a PM? What is the hiring process for a designer? What is at a certain point, it's like, can you think outside of the box? And can you do this to scale? And it's tricky. I understand you need some type of process to scale, but at some point, how do we start thinking differently, right? How do we think differently? Elon Musk said he's creating a school for his kids. He doesn't want to put his kids in the standardized school. Why? Why? Because they've processed everything down and put this little process of judgment of whatever they want you to follow to do. Whereas Elon Musk has thought different. He said, you know what? I want to push what people are good at and put them in positions where they would thrive. And I push this down to a thing like Albert Einstein said, I think it was to the form of, if you judge a fish's ability to climb a tree, it will think it's an idiot its entire life.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you do processes. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree to you. We also switched up like our hiring process like multiple times. For example, we pretty much found out when we want to hire like a senior people, we always ask, or I always ask, what's your biggest failure in your career and what did you learn from it? Not to judge the person, but from my point of perspective, nobody is perfect and everyone has like at least one bigger or major mistake or failure in his or her career. And it's always interesting to get like what did the person learn from it, because like we only get better from our mistakes. That's basically my philosophy. This worked out like pretty well. On the other hand, we also try to like the number one reason for rejecting candidates in our hiring process was like for a longer period of time the lack of English skills, because we are an international team and communication is very important. So we thought about, hey, what about that they just send us like introduction videos, for example, 30 seconds to 1 minute to us, and we can like without even have to speak with them. We could just evaluate them and their English skills basically. But this turned out like as a really bad idea, and we like stopped it after 1 week or so because we recognized this is just like unfriendly as hell. It prevents us like from actual good candidates who are just not wanting to record a video of themselves, which I totally understand in the after process. But it's also like a thing. If you wouldn't have tried it out, you would still ask yourself, hey, what if we would implement like introduction videos in the hiring process? Maybe it would be better for the process itself. So I think it's important to make those kind of learnings also as a company, because like, especially when you're a startup, you have to try different things out to see, hey, what works out, what not. Everything is very fast paced. And of course you do mistakes, but on the other hand, like, you learn from it and you come to like the real efficient way.
I agree, man. I agree, Julius. But like I said, I mean, like the whole video thing, that I already knew that would be just done to a crash. See, I think my point is everybody tries to do these psychological analysis and process driven things, and everybody's different. Remember, Albert Einstein, I'll put it back to that same fucking quote. If you judge a fish's ability to climb a tree, it will think it's an idiot its fucking entire life. So when you're thinking about things, when you're hiring people, you can't always hire people in a scale process. You have to do things like Paul Graham said, do things that don't fucking scale. If we're doing that with our startups and our companies, why aren't we implementing this shit in our fucking hiring processes? We need to hire people that we feel that don't follow a fucking process. We need to find out what their superpower are. Like, what are you good at? Show me what you can do. I need to kind of test things, but I get it. We have a short time to actually do that. So it's like, how do we do that with as less time as possible? And so we'll get a lot of wrong signals, and we'll hire a lot of wrong fucking people because we'll create these little processes that are biased because they're what we think would be a good candidate psychologically. Some people might not be good at video. Some people might fucking suck at video. Actually, a lot of people suck at video. Some people might be introverted. So now you picked up a different personality type, but they might be great at creating shit. You know, I've seen guys, I'll put it in a musical perspective or even in an engineering perspective. There was guys who sat in their fucking garages and changed the fucking world. You know, Nikola Tesla, he sat in the fucking corners. He changed the fucking world. You know, he worked for other people. But you just let this fucker go off and just, you do something. This fucker, we just need some stuff. You go ahead and do it. He's like ambitious as fuck. He didn't really need tons of people to do this. You just gave him some fucking resources. This fucking guy went. Right? But if we would have put down if I could have created a test that would have been not so friendly for his superpowers, he would have failed. And he would have never got hired. As a matter of fact, he came to fucking United States because he wasn't doing good in his country in Europe. He wasn't given those opportunities that he was. He came to the United States because he wanted those opportunities. And he wasn't even doing what he first originally came here to actually do. He was working shitty jobs. But I could have said he was a bad employee. He sucked. He's not a hard worker. I could have said all those things. I could have said this fucking guy sucks at picking oranges. He's a horrible worker. He will never make anything of his fucking life. But again, if we use that same Einstein principle and we try to find that person's superpower, right, within that skill set, we might be fucking amazed. But when you put people in projects and things that they really kind of don't want to do, or environments where they don't actually, excel faster in, we will get a wrong signal. And I think we try to copy and paste these processes of hiring these core people that we care so much about that make up the team. But yet we're doing these things that are process driven to do fast hiring. We're like, oh yeah, we just need some great people that are, going to be innovative. And we wonder why our companies fucking suck after 5 years and why we're not doing shit. And we got to acquire fucking companies for 10 or 12 or $30 billion because our processes is not to scale. We got shitty interviewers and recruiters who really don't know how to pick out entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurs that are at the top, they don't have time for that shit anymore. So they're just like, deny. So somebody who doesn't have the actual knowledge to hire somebody properly that is innovative is firing them motherfuckers, right? Like, for example, WhatsApp founder. Yeah. He was at Yahoo. He had tried to work for Facebook, I think a couple of times, or maybe it was one or twice, whatever it may be. He tried to work for Facebook, right? They denied him. They said he wasn't good enough. Bro. Then you had to buy that fucking same person.
Cost them a lot of money.
You think? So this is the same type of thing. And even if you go back to yourself, Julius, you even stated earlier on in our conversation, you said, hey, I have a different type of DNA. So imagine or different personality or ambition, whatever it may be, right? Imagine if people judged you on a process that, didn't push your superpowers. They would think you suck and they would pass on you. When you could be right there, the fucking next Elon Musk. But who the fuck knows? Elon Musk said to himself, he went into, I think it was Netscape offices when he came to Silicon Valley, and he was like, hey, I wanted to get a job, and I stood out in the lobby and I got scared and thought they wouldn't hire me, and I walked away and said, maybe I just can build my own thing. Because he felt that he wasn't worthy. So how do you hire those people?
According to that, I think Bill Gates also said once that he always looks for the most lazy people, which is laziness is in the public a very, very bad attitude. But he explained it that he only wants that he looks for lazy people because they get the job done as fast as possible, because they do not want to spend so much time on a specific project. And this also fits to your quote quite well, I would say.
I agree with you, man, and I think that's a good thing. But Bill Gates also said a lot of things. He had a lot of he had a lot of reflection of how he looked at his hiring processes and life in general in the past. And he used to think that you had to have this great PhD and master's degree and et cetera. And he used to only hire towards those type of skill sets. But then he realized that didn't fucking matter as he grew. But somebody pushed that in his brain, or he thought, in his brain, you had to be his highest achiever in order to build these great things. And then he changed his mind later on. Of course, he said, the best people in my class who had the highest grades now all work for me at Microsoft.
Yeah.
This is another thing again. So if we go back to that same thing, if you judge a fish's ability to climb up a tree, it will always think it's dumb its entire life. So if we looked at if we did a process and we said, hey, this process tells me if you're going to be a good employee, it signals that to me. You're going to think a lot of people are not good employees because you went by this process instead of looking for how do I find the superpower in this individual? And you're going to assign them a different task and different teams based off of the wrong process or hiring processes. So, for example, if we go back to the WhatsApp founder who didn't pass a Facebook interview as an engineer, they said he wasn't good enough, obviously. I mean, because he didn't get hired, right? But this guy built fucking WhatsApp, right? So at what point did we fuck up, or did they fuck up? At what point did they fuck up? Was the person who was the recruiter not smart enough to find out if this person was, this innovator and bring him into the company where he could have built some shit like that in the company, and the company would have had WhatsApp? What was the point where they fucked up? And I think that's hard. It's hard to figure out where you fuck up.
Do you think he at that time to join Facebook?
I don't think he ever would have. I think Facebook wasn't ready to hire him. I think the recruiters weren't ready to hire him because, again, they have a process. Nice, yeah. And when you don't pass this process, that says you're bad. You can't do it. You're not a fit. So by default, you fucking kicked out a guy because you built a stupid little fucking process. You didn't try to find this person's superpower, and you didn't put him in this unique position that you just kicked him to the curb. So, okay, well, based off of our process that our other designer or other engineers created, you're not smart enough to work here. But what the fuck did he build? He built something on the level of Mark Zuckerberg.
$1 empire.
Yes. And if he had to probably go through a design challenge or something like that within the company of Facebook, he would have failed. I mean, he would have failed. And you know why? Because he didn't understand the process of the hiring. But once you mastered the hiring process for most companies, you can get in mostly any company. And all those signals that everybody's trying to measure, once you kind of learn the majority of them, you can get into any company. Right? You can get in any company. You do the leak code. You just copy what the leak code requirements are and what they're most likely going to test for. You just get really good in that. Anytime somebody gives you that code, that test, you pass. As long as you have a decent personality. You don't have to have the extraordinary personality. You pass the test. He did it. Okay, there you go. This is our process. But that process, it kind of works to scale, but it doesn't work on efficiency. And I think that is the point that ends up costing a lot, is you end up losing $1 billion, founder or another person in your company that could have innovated something that could have made you this much more money than you had to pay for that person. Because how much did you pay for all those employees that you hired versus the one person or a couple of people that you just denied and didn't bring in because your process sucked? Sometimes our processes sucked. And that's what I'm just saying is like, the hiring process needs to think about how do we...
What do you think? What could have Facebook... Yeah, exactly. In your opinion, what could have Facebook did differently to integrate him like in the company, or to push him through? Because or to at least have the ability within such a big corporation to have to let those creative minds be creative enough to build WhatsApp out of Facebook, for example.
I think you need to look up different attributes: ambition, different soft skills, ambition, ability to work on them by themselves, abilities to work with groups, and see what they can come up with. I'd like to see what people can come up with before I'm bringing in candidates. I want to see what people can come up with, because you never know when people just get this spark. People learn differently. So you might not notice these magical points. That's why I believe if you can contract certain people in for the first 3 months or 6 months before they really gravitate and start really understanding some ideas, you have a good signal that they kind of could be something solid, right? And you do things, to a point to where they don't scale. I think you can kind of evaluate, what they're good at and what they're not. You can give them specific projects and tasks. It's cheaper probably than hiring or firing tons of people and going through all these different recruiters, contacting different people and interviewing them and putting all your energy and resources into just interviewing. And you're coming up with a lot of blanks. You're hiring a bunch of people who just put wood on the fire. And once somebody learns how to pass the test, you're just hiring people who just learn how to pass the test. And typically what happens is they can copy and paste that same test. They can teach it to their friends. They practice with their friends. This happens at a lot of these big companies. I've been in the conversation. You have a friend. This is another thing too. A lot of these companies will do these things where they have a referral process, which is where you refer one of your friends. But typically, a lot of those people that are referring their friends, they're also helping their friends pass these tests and telling what they're looking for. And so they just learn what they're looking for and practice that, and then they get in. And the people that don't get in.
To also get the referral bonus, of course.
Well, do you want to? You're going to get that referral bonus because if you really help that person. So they're usually not going to try to refer somebody that they think they're not going to be able to help.
All right, yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? That's why the people are real stingy or sticky about like who they refer, because they're not going to usually refer a random person. Sometimes it does happen, but because some people have to fail. It's like about a part of the numbers. They don't really care. Some people just like don't care. They're like, oh, I would give out referrals to some people who I met, and just whatever happens because hey, it looks like I've given out some things and some people failed, so it looks like there's this failing thing. If everybody was passing, Zuck might or another founder might come around and say, hey, what the hell's going on? Why is everybody getting in? That looks bad on the reputation. Let's have a lot of people that fail. Makes us look good. It's a fake. It's a false.
Probably for Harvard or those other Ivy League universities as well. Like it's basically the same system.
Yeah, I mean, if you go at a lot of higher Ivy League schools, they're not fucking learning anything harder than what you're learning. They are just actually pushing you to do more things like build companies and to be innovative and to open your mind. They're pushing you to be more creative and to build companies. They're pushing you with these ideas to think more freer. Whereas smaller and shittier schools are pushing you to kind of just do these mundane jobs. Very process driven. Ivy Leagues are not as process driven to a certain extent.
I think a huge part of those Ivy League universities is also like who you're studying with. Because like the competition at Harvard is like so much more higher. Like everyone already built like $3 billion companies before they started Harvard, or like of course it's exaggerated, but like you have all those high achievers like at one place, so it becomes like even more like difficult for you to stand out.
Yeah, it does, but they look for different attributes. For example, my co-founder in my first startup. He went to Harvard after my startup, and that got him the actual meeting to one of the professors. The professor gave him a letter of recommendation to Harvard. He also had the solid grades, but he wasn't an expert in math, but he was good enough, and he was proven to be ambitious, and they want winners. They want winners to graduate out of schools, because what does that do? Smarter people realize that if you hire winners and they come from your fucking circle, it makes your circle look better.
Yeah.
Stupid companies think, oh, what if this person beats me? Or what if they leave? Do you see what I'm saying? What if they leave? What if Julius builds $1 billion company while he's working here? Oh my God. He's not going to work on our project and we're going to be out of him, so we're going to lose money. No, dude. You want people like Julius. You want people who have founder DNA to be at your company and let them work on their side projects just as long as they're getting tasks done. That's all that matters. And if Julius becomes super popular for building $1 billion company, they know he came from our company. And that's the DNA of our company. This is the kind of stuff that comes out of here. Yeah. Do things that don't scale.
It's actually a nice perspective. Yeah. Yeah, and I never really thought about that, but also like it's a really common thing that also like for people at Google or Apple, for example, that they still like work at those companies and start like with all those different side hustles. as soon as it becomes like big enough for getting like VC funding, dropping out of those bigger corporations and really like evolve like in their own projects.
Yeah, because I mean, here's the thing. There's also another process when it comes to funding. There's a biasness that comes into funding. You know, there's a biases in general. For example, before I worked at bigger companies and bigger orgs in tech, you know, a lot of people, I would talk to them about my ideas and the things that we're doing and executing. And they were like, that's amazing. That's great. But where do you work at now? Or what did you work before? What's your background? Everybody was digging into your background. And what they were looking for were signals because they had a process. Their process was, did you already work at Google? Did you already work at Facebook? Did you already work at these companies that we approve or we think are good enough? And if you worked in those, then your opinion matters and your idea matters because we feel like you have enough money and you left it and you're smart enough to get in these companies that obviously you can build something else.
Yeah.
So it begins to be like these tag and these reference points where it's just like, oh, Julius is an ex-Googler who wants to build a startup, you know, and it's like, all right, cool. Julius wants to build a startup. So you know what? I go back to my investors in my firm and he looks like a safe bet. Who did you give the money to? I gave it to Julius because Julius, you know, is an ex-Google guy. So it sounds like a smart buy before I give my money away or other people's money for my firm and invest it into a dude who is just not a random dude who's just like, oh, who's Julius? Oh, it's a guy who came from, you know, Germany and he has a startup and I like the idea. What'd you give my money to? Oh, no. But if you just say it's Julius, he's an ex-Google engineer and he came up with an idea and he's a pretty smart guy and I gave him $500K. Oh, really? Okay, cool. Sound nice. Yeah. What's it called?
It also looks like way better on your pitch, like when you have like the small Google sign beside your picture. Definitely. I mean, I can also like quite understand it because like also VCs, our investors in general, need some sort of benchmark or proven track record to keep their personal risk low, or as low as possible actually. But like, I mean, for example, if you look at, I don't know who, like for example, Elon Musk, who was he before PayPal, for example, and who would have known that this guy would like change the world and like, I don't know, fly to Mars in a couple of years. I mean, nobody would have known that.
Because we have, again, we don't hire and we don't invest in things that don't scale. We hire on things that we see that we've come up as processes to scale. And that's why we fucking miss out. This is why investors miss out on big opportunities and big founders who could build amazing things. This is why a lot of founders actually fucking never create the ideas that they ever push out because they may lack certain skills that, or, you know, or signals that these investors or, you know, founders may be looking for, or hiring managers. They might lack them. They might lack the signals and processes that they've embedded or put in place. And you use that signal in the direction that might not be fitting for an introvert, he doesn't pass. If I'm looking for somebody who's, I say on my fucking, you know, hiring process, I'm looking for somebody who's outgoing, you know, who's a self-starter and who's a driver. Well, what happens when you're not outgoing? Do you look like you're a self-starter? Do you look like you're ambitious? You could be ambitious and a self-starter, but maybe you're not outgoing. You fucking failed because now they got these signals in and they put these guidelines up that we're looking for people, you know, who are like this. And if you don't fit that mold, then you're not a good person and you're not quality enough and you're not a team fit. You're fucked. You're gone. They just missed out on Elon Musk or Julius Musk, right? They missed out on you, right?
But from your experience speaking, I mean, you already like worked in a couple of bigger corporations, and why don't they just like change their processes? I mean, they have so much resources, so many big
the people that
so good ideas.
Because the people, and I'm sorry about that, but to clarify that, you're asking again, why don't bigger companies change it? I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've recently asked these questions again. A lot of stuff is redundant. It doesn't make sense to scale. And maybe it's something to do with maybe it's something to do with time management. Maybe they don't have fucking time. Maybe they haven't found a more efficient way to hiring. We need more innovation on the hiring processes and the funding processes because they're mundane and they're copy and paste. I remember when Zuckerberg was getting funding, you know, and Facebook was big and it came out. all these fucking founders were looking for guys that looked like Mark Zuckerberg or sounded like they were Mark Zuckerberg. So if you had a great idea, it really didn't fucking matter. Did you fit the type script? Did you look like a Jewish guy from fucking, New York or United States or anywhere around the world? Let's fund this guy. He has an idea and he has a decent school or he has some product, but maybe it doesn't have millions of users or whatever not. People were doing shit like that. And it's typecasting. This is why you see a lot of the founders typically look the same around the world. They typically look the same. They have similar backgrounds. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? The fucking guys who built the pyramids didn't look like Mark Zuckerberg, right? The fucking guys who built pyramids in China didn't look like Mark Zuckerberg. There's difference. These Aborigine tribes in Australia didn't look like Zuckerberg, but they built all this cool shit. Right? They did these amazing drawings. People look different. So when you try to typecast things, you're doing things to scale. You're not doing things that don't scale. So you miss out on a lot of creativity and diversity into mental skill set. And then also cultural skill sets, right? Where there's different perspectives that somebody from a different culture may not understand. Right? You've seen it when you're doing copy. When we're doing copy for different products, a person who doesn't understand a certain culture might just do a generalization of a copy and might do some investigation, but they're not a part of that culture, so they might not fucking understand the full picture. And they might make some type of mockery of it and not realize that it's fucking offensive or it really doesn't fucking work. But they did some user interviews and they tried to figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree to that. And I think this could be also like a great goal for the podcast itself to just have such an impact to those bigger corporations to completely revamp the hiring processes.
It's broken, man. It's fucking broken. If you haven't figured that out by what I've said to you within the last 30 or 40 minutes, it's fucking broken. The hiring process is broken. It hasn't been innovated since. And everybody's just reading the same fucking books. They're reading the same fucking books by some dude who worked in another company who wants to get rich. And so he came up with some principles and he said, hey, this is how I judge a good designer. This is how I judge a fucking engineer. And then everybody reads the same fucking books. Oh, yeah. So let's do this. Let's see if he can do this task, because I read the book of Atrium. Have you read this book? Have you read this book? It's so good. He says you should do this. I fucking wrote that book, bitch. I can write the same fucking book and push that to you. And now you're going to go tell everybody fucking that Tavares wrote this fucking book. And now you're going to copy that same shit. And now every fucking body's going to be a bunch of sheep and copy that same, mental mold that I just fucking created a process. And they're going to say it like it's truth, because now I just fucking wrote I could sit right now, write a bestseller book of how to scale companies. And I can come up with some terms and organizations within the book of how you would do that, and then have everybody regurgitating that shit all through the startup community. How to be a great engineer.
And applicants just read it as well, and completely pass the whole process.
Of course,
you didn't win anything. Yeah,
because you didn't think like Albert Einstein. You didn't think like that. You just fucking judged some fucking silly ass process that some other dude created. And this is why I always laugh when people sit there and say, oh, like when somebody comes with an idea, like, I'm thinking about building things like this. And somebody says, oh, well, you're not Elon Musk, or you're not Mark Zuckerberg, or you're not this person. It's like, wait a minute here. Those motherfuckers were somebody before they fucking were somebody. They were nobody before they were somebody. So now you know it. So how can you judge who's who? How do you know that you're not the next fucking Zuckerberg? How do they know you're not the next Elon Musk? So you telling somebody, who do you think you are, for saying that is almost ridiculous in some sense, because you never know who the fuck you are, right? You could be this little dude who's homeless and could be the next billionaire. You don't fucking know. So don't judge people by these silly ass processes and skills in life. But that's what we try to do to try to judge people fast. We look for signals. Oh, he's got shitty clothes. He's poor. He's homeless. He's not worthy. Oh, he has no money. Oh, he has a nice car. He's
after our podcast. After this podcast, I will definitely look at my hiring processes again, and will update you definitely to what I changed, because I mean, I think it's quite beneficial to have like some sort of settled processes, but I definitely agree to you that you should be like look more to the individual itself, and like really look at those soft skills, because like talent is so important, especially for early stage projects, that you can't really afford it to miss out of talent.
No, you can't. They end up being very expensive, right? They end up being expensive mistakes. And this is the problem, that it's not just, I'm not just mentioning this for guys like, Zuck in the past. And, this has happened. If you go back and look at the fucking trajectory of many companies, many of these billion-dollar companies and, Microsoft's, they're acquiring all the time. Because you know what? It's almost better if you can just go off and figure out how to build a company by yourself on the side and get it to a certain level, and then get somebody to acquire you before you actually go working for somebody. Because guess what? They won't really look at your true quality. They'll just look at you like you're dumb. Or you can only do the certain task. Oh, you're an engineer. You can only do, you're a level 3 or you're level 4. I'll pay you this. It's a systematic structure.
And after 2 years you get a 5% pay rise. Yeah, I mean I see it as well. Inflation adjusted, not of course.
I mean, dude, I have a friend, and I'm not going to mention his name, but for example, we always talked about this. We were talking about this at Stanford, on campus, a couple of years ago. And I remember I was like, I was just pretty blunt. I was just like, I always think about how the system and the structure of the world is just so fucking copy and paste. It's so weak, but we all stand around like, no, we're so original. And it's like, no, it's so fucking fake. We look for these little small attributes and we judge it on everybody and do it fastly. I understand we want to do it efficiently. We don't have that much time, but how do we think to things and look at things that don't scale? Because I think it saves us money in the long run, lots of money. And I told him, I was like, hey, look, you're working at such and such FANG company. And, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to leave. I'm getting this much money and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, dude, but you've been in that same fucking company for 5 years. You haven't moved much from that position. Like, there's so many other people that are ahead of you that want that same position. So you're never going to fucking barely move. And somebody you could be better than is never going to let you get up there. So what the fuck are you going to do? You're almost better going off starting your own fucking thing and then having them buy you back. So guess what he did? He fucking went over to this other company. And he spent 2 years with some founder guy who already had a repetitive, track record to build little startups and sell them off. And he did that for 2 years. And now he's at 2 years. And guess what? Another big FANG company came to him and offered him a VP position. He would have never got this fucking VP position. And on top of that, they didn't ask him to go through the interviewing process like everyone else. So what would have happened differently if he would have went on the regular process and tried to switch to that company? He would have never been in that same VP opportunity, and he would have still had to interview some mundane process over and over again. He had to get out away from the company and prove himself and, in a short-term time and boost himself up, then go back and have them look at him as eye candy. How do we miss that? How do we miss that?
Mean, I think the real big question is just like, how can you like change your individual hiring process to like do not miss out on those talents, and to really look at the human itself, because like you only have a limited time, of course, and I think like the best idea would be just to do it like on your system, or what we do at Polar as well, to just see like if a candidate works out after like an as good as possible like hiring process that you already have set in stone.
Because, I mean, there's more than one way to solve a problem. And somebody might come up with an amazing solution, but they might do it totally ass backwards from the way you would think of things. For example, I've built plenty of things with different types of people and in general, whether it was a car or fix things or a guitar or amp. But there's so many different ways, to do things efficiently and come up with different ways. And it's amazing when you see people do things differently and still come up with a success. There's so many ways to cook a successful fucking plate of food. And you never would have thought of that. You never would have thought that fucking ingredient would match. This is why you have great chefs like Chef Ramsay, who goes to India and goes to different countries and learns from these random ass chefs. And he's like, yo, what the fuck did he just do? Like, that doesn't make sense. But this fucking tastes amazing. But if he would have judged them by the processes of what his area would say is good and how you would properly do it of that process, he would have fucking said, this person's not a good cook. They can't pass. They don't look what they did with the food. They put this spice here and they cooked it this way. This doesn't make sense. He's going to fail. That's it. Or I've seen a person play guitar and people learn guitar in different ways. Some people who just will listen to a music and they will just be able to play it. Amazing. Some people will fucking be able to read music and play any music that they're able to read. Some people who read music can't fucking just hear music and just start playing. But then some people can create more original music. So how do you judge who's fucking better, right? Kurt Cobain was not a great guitarist. He was a shitty guitarist, but he was great at coming up with the whole holistic melodies and expressing himself for that time. Jimi Hendrix was an amazing fucking guitarist, right? Amazing fucking guitarist. But do you know when he was playing in the United States, fucking nobody wanted to fucking put him in bands. Nobody, he joined a couple of bands and he wrote on their success of like big celebrities at the time, like Little Richard, you know, a wop bop a loo bop a wop. He was a fucking background guitarist for fucking him. Are you serious? He actually fired him. He said, hey, there's only room for 2 stars here. You're out. Right? And in the United States, they said, hey, Jimi Hendrix, you're not going to play fucking rock and roll because of your skin color. He had to move to Europe. He was getting kicked out of cars for his skin color. He had to move to Europe and England and start playing over there. He quit the military. He started playing guitar over there, and he wowed fucking the English people. And they're like, what the fuck is this? They were like, hey, man, you had guys like Eric Clapton like, hey, you guys need to come down here. This guy's going to take our fucking job. He's fucking amazing. You know, this is what they did. He created his band in fucking Europe, but this dude was already in the United States.
Wow.
How did we miss him? Process.
Yeah. Prejudiced and like set in stone opinions. Yeah, I mean, it's very good. I think at some point it's like very difficult also to have the motivation to change your processes, because like, I mean, look at Google or Facebook. They're so like, they're already so successful. They have so much money. They just really don't have this ambition anymore or the motivation behind like changing processes to keep everything still innovative. I think like that the real change makers are at that point, like startups, innovative companies, or smaller organizations as well, that just have like the motivation to find talents, and really want and really keep them as well.
Yeah, I think it's almost like finding talent that can just, you know, particularly do task-based talent that can follow a script, you know, and just kind of copy and paste it. Even though we say, no, we want to find somebody who can work on their own and things like that. That's not really what they fucking hire for. Because if you were, you wouldn't be following this exact process over and over again for every single candidate. Think about that. You wouldn't be following a process over and over, copy and paste for every single candidate if you were trying to find someone who was doing things original or different, or who could manage things on their own. I mean, come on, bro. There's no way. They're thinking the same. They're copying and pasting the same process. How are you finding somebody fucking different if you're using the same process to evaluate every single candidate? There's no way you're doing it. So, and it's obvious that they're not doing it, because this is why you find a lot of these founders are the biggest founders are not usually coming out of these companies. I mean, even look at guys like Kevin Systrom of Instagram, right? He was a founder of Instagram. He originally was working with the core founder team as an internship at the predecessor of Twitter, which was called Odeo. And Jack Dorsey was not even the fucking CEO of Twitter. He was working for the other co-founders of Twitter. He was working for them. He was just, He was a little shitty coder who wasn't that great coder. They didn't even consider him a great developer. He had learned a little code. He had moved from like the Midwest, but they just had him working there, and he had a little job, and he was just winging it. He came to Silicon Valley. He liked maps, and he liked, you know, short communication and shit like that, supposedly. And they hired him at a company called Odeo. But they ended up finding out that the idea of the startup wasn't working out that well. So they asked everybody in the little small startup group, maybe like 4 or 5 group of people, what else can we build? And go back to the investors. Jack Dorsey came up, well, maybe we can do this Twitter thing. And that's how they built that's how they built Twitter. That's how they built fucking Twitter. But he was just an employee of them. He wasn't equal. He wasn't over the other guys there at the company. He wasn't the best guy, but look at him fucking now. And then look at Kevin Systrom. He was just a fucking intern at fucking Odeo. He was actually asked by some of the founders of Facebook around the early 06, 07 area, when he was still in Stanford, to come work at Facebook as just like a position as like an engineer. But he's like, nah, I kind of want to figure out what I want to do. And so he worked for Odeo, which is the predecessor of Twitter. And then after that, he went on to build Instagram.
Life's crazy, actually, because like it's very interesting how like originally like you can go like from intern or from like some sort of unimportant employee at that time. You can move your way to being the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company and one of the biggest social networks that exist today, and like how big like hidden talent can be, and how also like people can make progress in challenging times when they really can make an impact. And I think it also shows like leadership experience. I mean, imagine also like Jack Dorsey could just have said like, no, I have no actual idea about how we can change the company, but still managed to come up with his own stuff and convinced them, apparently.
You've got to give people the freedom to just fucking create shit. And then you got to make sure that you don't have these people overlords telling them that their fucking idea sucks. Because of all these ideas, if you look through history, most people thought they sucked. Most people thought their ideas, and I think Peter Thiel can resonate with this. A lot of people will think you're fucking crazy. Your idea makes no fucking sense until it doesn't, right? They think it's crazy until it doesn't. So that's why I always laugh at people when people say, oh my God, I knew this person was going to be a genius. No, you fucking didn't. Most people are going to think you're a fucking Looney Tune. Most people are going to think you're fucking crazy. They're going to think you're crazy. Oh, Tesla. Oh, Nikola Tesla's guy fucking building shit in the middle of the desert. What is he doing? Oh, he wants to change electricity. Oh, he's fucking nuts. Oh, he wants to go do something at the dam and change the way we're doing electricity. And yeah, it's ridiculous. They want to go by a track record of a process to show that you've had these proven success previously before we take the risk. This is what we do as a civilization. And you can see it no matter what industry you look at. You go and look at the music industry. You see guys like Scooter Braun. Scooter Braun discovered, if we don't know who he is, he discovered Justin Bieber, right? Who's one of the biggest entertainment acts of our time right now. I would say one of them, not the most. Michael Jackson and other people are way bigger, but he's one of the most of our time. And what was he doing? He was just on fucking YouTube, fucking singing in Canada. And oops, sorry about that. I was talking about Justin Bieber and Scooter Braun. So he was just sitting over there on YouTube singing, and Scooter Braun was just working for these big rappers and doing college parties for them and helping them around little college parties. He was bowing down to these guys who were big time, and he was just, oh, I just want to do little college parties. And oh yeah, Scooter, do this. Oh, you do this. They didn't look at him as a rival, and he didn't act like he was a rival. He act, oh yes, oh yeah, oh cool, I'll do that for you. Oh yeah, sure, I'll do this. But secretly, this joker, he was plotting. I'm gonna get all their fucking information, learn their processes and how they're doing shit. But secretly, he had to think, I'm fucking smarter than these motherfuckers, and I'm gonna take this bigger. But he played silly, he played stupid, he played dumb, and then once he got all the connections from them, from throwing the little parties, he said, I'm gonna let them do anything they want, call me any name, whatever, and I'm going to take their secrets, and now I'm going to find me somebody, and I've got these connections now for working for these people and being the little person for them, the peon, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to contact them about this guy named Justin Bieber, and I'm going to bring him and introduce him to these people that I met through these other people, pretending like I was a nobody, and now they're going to sign this kid, and now I'm going to be A&R, and now this guy's going to get signed, and now I'm going to be a fucking millionaire, and now I'm going to buy other celebrities' fucking things, and the people that I was once managing, I'm bigger than them.
Yeah.
But how did they wouldn't have known. They never knew. They never fucking knew. because their process was, who are you now? If you're not famous now, you're not going to be it. And I don't think you're a threat.
It's also quite interesting how different his way of like finding talent was. I mean, if you look at the first videos from Justin Bieber, I think I watched one once, and what I remember, they don't really had a great quality. He was just like sitting on a sofa singing, but Scooter Braun like apparently like still managed to think like, hey, I can make a world star out of him.
But see, this is something that I was talking about earlier, Julius, that I was chiming on, is that there's certain people who just have this ability to kind of tell what are the basic points of somebody who can, you know, that is needed to be that next big thing. Like I said, I can look over, you know, somebody's work. I can look at somebody's, you know, development over a couple of projects, and I can tell, how does it lazy load? How did it function? I can tell how strategic and thoughtful was this engineer. The same thing with somebody design. I can look at how their designs look and tell if they have a similar feel and pattern and a vibe and energy where they can do my work. I don't have to do all these other fucking things. The other things are just like culture fit and just trying to see if they get my idea and all these other personal things that we want to match. But overall, I can kind of get if you can do the fucking job. I don't need you to be your best friend. I just need you to do the fucking job. Right? That's a problem with so many people in these culture fits. They want them to be your fucking friend. Nobody's your friend at these companies. They don't even fucking like you. A lot of these people have these initiatives or these mentalities where they just want to come and get money and get rich. They don't fucking like you. They're lying. They always want to take another position or get up higher than you sometimes. And some people want to coast. Not everybody wants to be higher. Some people just want to coast and get the fucking money. Fuck you. I just want to take some little cash and feel like I'm living the life, which is fine. But my point is, in general, is not everybody else thinks the same. But I don't know. I just think it's a different process. And he was able to evaluate these strategic points to see that success. And I think certain people are able to just tell. He didn't have to bring him on Star Search or any type of thing and say, okay, well, sing here and do this. He knew by watching the video, okay, I can see these attributes about him. I know what I can do with that. He didn't have to do all these crazy interviews. He's like, no, I need to contact that guy. He's got it. Some people can tell if you got it. Some people have this talent to do that, but not everybody does. And so that's probably harder to scale things. And that's probably why everybody does a process thing. You know, how do we do that to scale? Everybody can't be a Scooter Braun. So how do we do that? We can't find people like that typically. So let's just create a process. And if you don't fucking pass it, you're not Justin Bieber. Tipple. That's it. And that's why a lot of Justin Biebers, that's why now with social media like TikTok and all these different social media tools, there's these other people, there's so many people coming out of nowhere and creating their own brands, because now it's proven that you can pretty much, if you're good at doing social media, you can make yourself a fucking Justin Bieber now. If you're just good with social media. There you go. So this is just something that I see when you're talking about doing things that don't scale. I think you should do, when you're doing a hiring process, you should do things that don't scale and figure out what that is for your company. And I know it's a hard problem to solve, but as people who build companies, you have to think about how you do things that don't scale and stop thinking about how you do things, you know, within a systematic, scalable process every single fucking time. Because this is something that Paul Graham kind of talked about, but nobody talks about it in the hiring process.
I definitely agree to that. Also, like, well, I think most of the companies will reach like that point to some degree where they recognize, hey, this feature doesn't work out, this one as well not. We have to try some different things. And I think at that point, like, true leadership really comes to the surface. And founders really have to step in, but also like individuals. For example, when you mentioned like the whole story of Twitter and Jack Dorsey, that you really have to be flexible in challenging times. I think this is still like undervalued when it comes to like skills of a founder.
Agreed. Well, man, dude, it's been fucking amazing conversation that me and you have had, Julius Walkenhorst. Oh, there we go. Yeah, man, we've had an amazing conversation, but what are some things that you might want to tell some of the audience?
Perfect.
Yeah, of course. What are some of the things you might want to tell the audience, you know, of how they can get in contact with you and some of the projects that you're working on? They can follow some of the amazing things that you've fucking done, because, you know, you've obviously done some amazing shit and you will continuously. Yeah.
I'd definitely say check out my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there. You can just type in my name or just Google me. You will find me instantly. But also, like, definitely check out Polar at getpolarized.io, and also ThirdAid, my NGO, if you're interested in donating, and non-profit organizations as well, under angel.co/ThirdAid. Yeah, exactly. That's it, basically.
Yeah, and you guys are hiring too, right?
Exactly. Yes, for both organizations, basically.
Yeah, tell everybody what you're hiring for. Maybe you might find your future CEO or your future entrepreneur or future great product designer or engineer.
If you are a backend or front-end engineer, definitely feel free to check out at any time. We are hiring on a rolling basis at ThirdAid and at Polar. We basically, at this point, we can't get enough of you. So definitely just shoot us a message, and we will set up an interview and the first call to hopefully also like implement those fabulous new hiring strategies that we just discussed in the podcast.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think somebody needs to fucking come up and write this actual book and, bring this information.
Exactly.
And then everybody's just going to copy and paste that same shit. Yeah, you only have to, be lucky once. I think that's one of the books, right? Too. And, I think Peter Thiel's what was it? What was Peter Thiel's book again? How did I forget it? But I forgot it again. What was it?
0 to 1.
Yes, 0 to 1. I love books, but we can't take every book and copy and paste every idea. They do inspire you, but sometimes we have to think different and do things that don't scale. But Julius, all the way from Germany, Frankfurt, is here today talking about his amazing companies, and it's been an awesome conversation. I think this has been a longer conversation I've had in a while. We went 2 hours and 22 minutes, probably not all of it because there was some drop down, but roughly this is how long we went. So we had some great conversations, and it's great to have you on, Julius, and keep in contact and, let me know what you're working on and, what you're doing and et cetera. And if there's anything I can always help out with, I definitely will refer you or try to put you in the same position for success. And may the force be with you. Just hang on for a second, and let's let everything upload on your side and my side. Okay?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. It was exciting. Yeah, and I'm sorry, like, for any unclarities. I know my English still has to be improved, but I hope it's fine for your audience.
You're good. You're amazing. Awesome.
Perfect.
Hold on for a second. Yee. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.